You wrapped some rice in seaweed and put it in its children's mouth. You put rice in your eldest son's and your second son's and your elder daughter's mouths. Even before you got to your younger daughter or the baby, Hyungchul was already waiting for more. It took you longer to prepare the rice than it took your children to eat it. You grew frightened of your children's appetites. You wondered what to do with all of them. That was when you decided that you needed to forget about the outside world, that you couldn't leave this house again. I'm home. You open the bedroom door. The room is empty. A few towels are neatly folded in one corner of the room, where your wife left them before you went to Seoul together. The water you took your pills with on the morning of your departure has evaporated from the glass you set on the floor. The clock on the wall shows that it is 3 p.m., and the shadows of bamboos lean into the room, which faces the backyard. I said I'm home, you say to yourself in the empty room, your shoulders slouched. What were you thinking? When you shook off your son, you vehemently disagreed with you coming home by yourself and took the morning train. A small corner of your heart nurtured the hope that when you walked in and called, "Are you here? I'm home," your wife would greet you as in old times. "You're home," perhaps while she cleaned the room or trimmed vegetables in the shed or washed rice in the kitchen. You thought that might happen somehow, but the house is vacant. It feels deserted, having been left empty for so long. You get up and open all the doors in the house. "Are you in here?" you ask at each door. You open the doors to your bedroom and the guest room and the kitchen and the boiler room. It's the first time you've desperately searched for your wife. Did she look for you like this every time you left home? You blink your dry eyes and open the kitchen window to look at the shed. "Are you in there?" But there's only the bare platform. Sometimes you stood in this spot and watched your wife busily doing something in the shed, and she would look over at you even if you didn't call her. And she'd ask, "What? Do you need something?" If you said, "Where are my socks? I want to go into town," she would quickly peel off her rubber gloves and come inside to find your clothes for you. You stare at the empty shed and murmur, "Hey, I'm hungry. I want to eat something." When you said you wanted to eat something, your wife would stop what she was doing without hesitation and come to you and say, "I picked some fascia in the hills. Do you want some fascia pancakes? Do you want to eat those?" Even if she had been slicing off the tops of peppers or folding sesame leaves or salting cabbage. Why didn't you know then when you had a peaceful and lucky life? How could you have taken what your wife did for you for granted without ever once making her seaweed soup? One day your wife came back from town and said, "You know that butcher you like in the market? I was passing today, and his wife kept calling me, so I went in, and she invited me to share some seaweed soup. So I asked, "What's the occasion?" She said it was her birthday, and her husband had made her soup that morning. You just listened, and she said, "It wasn't particularly tasty, but for the first time, I was envious for the butcher's wife." "Where are you?" "If your wife would just come back, you would make not only seaweed soup, but also pancakes for her." "Are you punishing me?" Water pools in your eyes. You left this house whenever you wanted to and came back at your whim, and you never once thought that your wife would be the one to leave. Only after your wife went missing did you recall the first time you saw her. It was after the families had decided that the two of you would marry before you had met each other. The war was over thanks to the ceasefire agreement between the UN and the communist commander at Panmunjom, but the world was more unsettled than it had been during the war. During this time, hungry North Korean soldiers came out of hiding in the hills at night and ransacked villages. When night fell, people with daughters of marriageable age hid them. A rumor that the soldiers from the hills snatched young women spread throughout the villages. Some would dig holes near the railroad tracks and hide their daughters there. Others spent the night huddled in one house together. Some quickly married off their daughters. Your wife lived in Chinmo from her birth until she married you. You were 20 years old when your sister told you that you would be marrying a young woman from Chinmo within a month. She said it was a young lady whose horoscope matched yours perfectly. Chinmo. It was a mountain village about 10 ri away from your village. In those days, it was common for people to marry without ever having glimpsed each other's faces. The ceremony was to be held in October in the yard of the young lady's house, soon after rice stalks were gathered from the paddies. Once the ceremony date was set, people teased you if you smiled, saying that you must be happy to be getting married. You neither liked nor disliked the idea because your sister did all of the housework in your house. Everyone said you had to hurry up and get married. It made sense, but it occurred to you that you couldn't live with a woman you'd never seen laid eyes on. You never wanted to live your entire life farming in this village. At a time when there were so few people available to work that even children were called to the fields, you wandered around town with friends. You made plans to run away and set up a brewery in a city with two friends. You were preoccupied not with marriage but with how to raise the money to open a brewery. So what was it that made you head over to Jinmue? Your bride's house was a cottage embraced by a thicket of bamboo trees at the back, with ripe red persimmons hanging low on a tree in one corner. Your bride, wearing a cotton chokori, was sitting on the porch of the cottage, embroidering a phoenix on an embroidery frame. Bright light bounced off the roof and the yard, but the young woman's expression was dark. She looked up at the clear autumn sky once in a while, craning her neck. She watched some geese flying in a row until they disappeared. The young woman got up and left the porch. Unseen, you followed her to the cotton fields. Your future mother-in-law was squatting in the fields, picking cotton. The young woman called from afar, "Mother!" Your future mother-in-law answered, "What?" without looking up, continuing to pick cotton. White cotton danced in the brisk air. You were about to turn back, but something made you inch closer to the women and hide, crouching amid the white tufts. The young woman called, "Mother!" again. Your future mother-in-law replied, "What?" without looking. "Do I have to get married?" You held your breath. "What? Can't I just live with you?" Cotton blossoms waved in the breeze. "No." "Why not?" The young woman had sorrow in her voice. "Do you want to be dragged off by the mountain people?" Your bride was silent for a moment, then crumpled in a cotton field, her legs stretched out, and burst into tears. At that moment, she wasn't the well-groomed, demure woman who had been embroidering on the porch of the cottage. She wept so achingly that you wanted to cry too, just from watching her. That was when your future mother-in-law waded out of cotton fields and went to the young woman. "Look, you're feeling this way because you're still young. I would have kept you by me a few more years if it wasn't for the war. But what can we do when the world is so frightening? It's not a bad thing to get married. It's something you can't avoid. You were born deep in the mountains. I wasn't able to send you to school. So if you don't get married, what can you do? When I matched your horoscope with the groom's, it said that you too will be very lucky. You won't lose a single child, and you will have many children, and they will grow up and succeed. What else could you want? Since you came into this world as a human, you have to live happily with your mate. You have to have your babies and breastfeed them and raise them. Stop crying. Stop crying. I'll make you special blankets with willowed cotton." The young woman kept sobbing loudly, and your future mother-in-law slapped her on the back. "Stop, stop crying." Your bride didn't stop, and your future mother-in-law burst into tears too. If by pure coincidence you hadn't seen the two women crying in each other's arms in the cotton field, you might have left home before October. When you thought of that young woman, however, embroidering on the porch of the cottage, calling out "Mother" at the cotton field, when you thought that she might be dragged away by a soldier into the mountains, never to be seen again, you couldn't pick up your feet to go away. When you came back to the empty house after your wife went missing, you slept for 3 days. You couldn't fall asleep at Young Charles. At night you lay there with your eyes closed. Your hearing grew so sensitive that your eyes would fly open if someone came out of the room across the way to go to the bathroom. At each mealtime, you sat at the table for the other's sake, even though you weren't hungry. But in your empty house, You didn't eat anything and slept like the dead. You thought you didn't love your wife very much because you married her after seeing her only once. But every time you left her and some time passed, she reappeared in your thoughts. Your wife's hands could nurture any life. Your family didn't have much luck with animals. Before your wife became a member of the family, any dog you got would die before giving you a litter. It would eat rat poison and fall into the toilet. Once, without anyone's realizing that dog had crawled into the floor heater, a fire was kindled in the furnace, and not until you smelled the stench did you lift open the lid and pull out the dead dog. Your sister said that your family shouldn't have a dog, but your wife brought home a newborn pup from the neighbors, one of her hands covering its eyes. Your wife believed that dog, being smart, would return to their mothers if their eyes were not covered when they were taken away. Your wife fed that puppy under the porch, and it grew and had 5 or 6 litters. Sometimes there were as many as 18 squirming puppies under the porch. In the spring, your wife coaxed the chicken to sit on an egg and managed to raise 30 or 40 chicks without killing them, except a few that were snatched by a kite. When your wife sprinkled seeds in the vegetable garden, green leaves shot up in a riot more quickly than she could pluck the tender shoots to eat. She planted and harvested potatoes, then carrots, then sweet potatoes. When she planted aubergine seedlings, purple aubergines hung everywhere throughout the summer and into the autumn. Anything she touched grew in profusion. Your wife didn't have time to take sweat-soaked towel off her head. As soon as wheat poked up from the fields, your wife's hands pulled them out, and as she chopped the food waste from the table into small pieces and poured them into the puppy's bowls. She caught frogs and boiled them and mashed them to feed the chickens, and collected chicken waste and buried it into the vegetable garden over and over again. Everything your wife touched became fertile and bloomed, grew, and bore fruit. Her talent was such that even your sister, who endlessly found fault with your wife, would call her and ask her for help sowing the fields and planting pepper seedlings. On the third night after you return home, you wake up in the middle of the night and lie still, staring at the ceiling. What is that? You are staring at a box with a yin-yang symbol perched on top of the wardrobe, and quickly get up. Memories of your wife waking one day in the early dawn, stirring and calling you, flood in. You didn't answer, even though you were awake, because you couldn't be bothered. You must be sleeping, your wife heaved a deep sigh. Please don't live longer than me. You remained quiet. You remained quiet. I have your shroud all prepared. It's in your yin-yang box up on top of the wardrobe. Mine is in there too. If I go first, don't panic. Take that down first. I spurged a little. I got them in the best hemp. They said they planted the themselves and wove the fabric out of it. You will be amazed when you see it. It's beautiful. Your wife murmured as if she were casting a spell, even though she didn't know if you were listening. When Damyang aunt passed away a while ago, her husband was bathed in tears. He said that before Damyang aunt died, she made him promise he wouldn't get an expensive shirt for her. She told him that she had ironed her wedding hanbok and asked him to put that on her when he sent her off to the next world. She said she was sorry that she was going first without even seeing their daughter get married, and that he shouldn't spend money on her. Damyang uncle was leaning on me when he told me that, and he cried so much that my clothes got completely wet. He said that all he did was make her work hard, that it was wrong of her to die now that they were a bit more comfortable, and that she'd made him promise he wouldn't buy her a nice outfit even at her death. I don't want to do that. I want to go wearing nice clothes. Do you want to see them? When you didn't move, your wife sighed deeply again. You should go before me. I think that's for the best. They say that although there's an order to when people come into the world, there isn't one when you leave. But we should go in the order we came. Since you are 3 years older than me, you should leave 3 years earlier. If you don't like that, you can go 3 days earlier. I can just live here, and if I really can't live by myself, I can go to Hyungchal's and be useful, peel garlic and clean. But what would you do? You don't know how to do anything. Someone has waited on you all your life. I can just see it. Nobody likes a smelly, silent old man taking up space. We are now burdens to the children who have no use for us. People say you can tell from the outside a house that has an old person living in it. They say it smells. A woman can somehow take care of herself and live, but a man becomes pathetic if he lives alone. Even if you want to live longer, at least you don't live longer than me. I'll give you a good burial and follow you there. I can do that. You climb on the chair to take down the box from the top of the wardrobe. Actually, there are two boxes. From its size, it looks like the box in front of is yours and the one behind is your wife's. They are much larger than they looked when were lying down. She said that she hadn't seen such a beautiful fabric in her life, that she'd gone far to get them. You open the box and there are hemp cloth, morning clothes wrapped in blindingly white cotton. You undo each knot. The hemp to cover the mattress, hemp to cover blanket, hemp to wrap the feet, hemp to wrap the hands, all size in order. You said you'd bury me first and then go. You blink and gaze at the pouches that would wrap your wife's fingers and toes after your death. Two girls run in through the side gate towards you, calling you, Grandpa, Taesup's children. Tesup's children, who live near the stream. They soon wander away from you, looking around the house. They must be looking for your wife. Tesup, who is running a Chinese restaurant in Daejeon, has left two children with his elderly mother, who was so old she could barely take care of herself and never showed his face. Perhaps he isn't doing too well. Your wife always clucked her tongue when he saw the children, saying, even if Tessop is like that, what kind of person is Tessop's wife to do this? Neighbors whispered that Tessop's wife and the restaurant's cook had run away together. Your wife was the person who made sure the children ate, not their own grandmother. Once your wife saw that they hadn't eaten and brought them home for breakfast. The next morning the girls came over, sleep still in their eyes. Your wife placed two more spoons on the table and seated the girls. After that, they came at each mealtime. Sometimes they would arrive before the food was ready and lie on their stomachs and play. And when the table was set, they would run over and sit down. They stuffed their mouths as if they would never see food again. You were flabbergasted, but your wife took their side as if they were her secret granddaughters. They must be so hungry to do that. It's not like before when things were difficult for us. It's nice to have them around. It's not as lonely. After the girls started to come for meals, your wife would, even in the morning, cook an aubergine dish and steam mackerel. When your children visited from Seoul with fruit or cake, she saved the treats until the girls poked their heads through the gate around 4 in the afternoon. Soon enough, the girls started expecting snacks on top of 3 meals, and your wife so started to assume that she would feed them. You don't know how she managed to feed the children when Pyeong-sik, the owner of the shop in town, had to bring her home because he found her sitting at the bus stop, not knowing which bus to take home. Or when she left to go to the garden to pick some adlay but was found sitting in the fields beyond the railway by Okchal. What did the children eat during your absence? You didn't think of the girls while you were in Seoul. Where's Grandma, Grandpa? The elder child asked you, realizing that your wife isn't here only after she has looked by the well and in the shed and the backyard and even opened the doors to the bedrooms. It's the elder who asks the question, but the younger girl comes right up next to you, waiting for your answer. You want to ask the same thing. Really? Where is she? Is she even in this world? You tell the children to wait, and you scoop some rice from the rice jar and wash it and put it in the electric rice cooker. The girls run around opening every bedroom door as if your wife might walk out of one of the rooms. You pause, not knowing how much water to pour in because you've never done this before. Then you add about half a cup more and press the switch button. That day, in the underground train leaving Seoul Station, how many minutes did it take you to grasp your wife wasn't there in the moving carriage? You assumed that she had got on behind you. As the car stopped at Namyang Station and left it, you felt a sudden terror. Before you could examine the source of that feeling, something despair that you had committed a grievous mistake, that you couldn't go back on, punched your soul. Your heart was beating so loudly that you could hear it. You were afraid to look behind you. The moment when you had to confirm that you'd left your wife in Seoul Station, that you'd boarded the train and traveled one stop. The moment that you turned around, accidentally hitting the shoulder of the person next to you, you realized that your life had been irreparably damaged. It didn't take even a minute to realize that your life had veered off track because of your rapid gait, because of your habit of always walking in front of your wife during all those years of marriage. First when you were young, then old, for 50 years. So if you had turned around to check whether she was there as you got on the car, would things have turned out this way? For years, your wife used to make comments. Your wife, who always lagged behind when you went somewhere together, would follow you with sweat beaded on her forehead, grumbling from behind. I wish you'd go a little slower. I wish you'd go at my pace. What's the rush? If you finally stopped to wait for her, she would smile in embarrassment and say, I walk too slowly, right? She would tell you, I'm sorry, but what would people say if they saw us? If they saw us who live together, but one person is all the way up there and the other person is all the way back here, they would say, those people must hate each other so much that they can't even walk next to each other. It's not good to appear that way to other people. I won't try to hold your hands or anything, but let's just go slower. What are you going to do if you lose sight of me? She must have known what would happen. The thing your wife said to you most frequently, ever since you met her when you were 20, was to walk more slowly. How could you have not gone more slowly when your wife asked you to slow down your entire lives? You'd stopped and waited for her, but you'd never walked next to her, conversing with her as she wanted, not even once. Since your wife has gone missing, your heart feels as if it will explode every time you think about your fast walk. You walked in front of your wife your entire life. Sometimes you would turn a corner without even looking back. When your wife called you from far behind, you would grumble at her, asking her why she was walking so slowly. And so 50 years passed. When you waited for her, she stopped next to you. Her cheeks reddened, saying with a smile, I still wish you'd go a little slower. You assumed that was how you would live out the rest of your days. But since that day in Seoul Station when you left on the train, that day when she was only a few steps behind you, your wife still hasn't come to you. You raise your leg, the one that was operated on for arthritis, and prop it on the porch, watching the girls wolf down the undercooked rice with only kimchi as banchan. After the surgery, you no longer felt pain and had circulation problems, but your left leg became impossible to bend. Want me to put a hot pad on it? You can almost hear your wife say that. Her hands dotted with dark sunspots, her hands that would put a pot of water on the stove and dampened the towel with hot water and placed it on your knee even if you didn't answer. Every time you saw her unshapely hands pressing down on the towel on your knee, you hoped that she would live at least one day longer than you. You hoped that after you died, your wife's hands would close your eyes on one last time. Wipe down your cooling body in front of your children and put the shroud on you. Where are you? You whose wife is missing? Who's left behind? Shout. Your leg stretched out on the porch of the empty house. The girls having run off after they finished eating. You shout, trying not to succumb to the sobs that have been climbing to the top of your throat since your wife went missing. You couldn't scream or cry in front of your sons or daughters-in-law, but now because of the rage or whatever it is, tears are pouring down your face, unstoppable. Tears that didn't come when your neighbors buried your parents, who died 2 days apart when cholera made the rounds in the village. Not yet 10 years old, you couldn't cry even though you wanted to. After your parents' burial, you walked down from the mountain, shivering, cold and scared, tears that didn't course down your face during the war. Your family used to own a cow during the day when South Korean soldiers were stationed in the village. You plowed the fields with that cow. North Korean soldiers would come down from the mountains into the village under cover of night and drag away people and cows. When the sun set, you would walk into town with the cow tied up next to the police station and go to sleep leaning on the cow's stomach. At dawn, you would take the cow back to the village and plow the fields. One night, you didn't go to police station because you thought the North Korean soldiers had left the area, but they swarmed into the village and tried to drag the animal away. You wouldn't let go of the cow. Even though they kicked you and beat you up, you ran after the cow, pushing aside your sister who tried to stop you from going. And even when you were beaten with the barrel of a rifle, you didn't cry. You who didn't shed a tear when you were thrown into the waterlogged rice paddy with other villagers, having been accused of being a reactionary because your uncle was a detective. You who didn't cry when a bamboo spear went through your neck. You are sobbing loudly. You realize how selfish you were to wish that your wife survived you. It was your selfishness that made you deny that your wife had a serious illness. In some corner of your heart, you must have known that your wife, who often appeared fast asleep when you came home at night, kept her eyes closed because her headache was so severe. You just didn't think about it too hard. At a certain point, you knew that your wife would go outside to feed the dog, but instead would head for the well, or that she would leave the house to go somewhere, but would stop in her tracks at the gate. not remembering where she was going, then give up, then come back inside. You just watched as your wife crawled into the room, barely managing to find a pillow and lie down, a frown etched on her face. You were always the one in pain, and your wife was the one who looked after you. Once in a while, when your wife said her stomach hurt, you were the kind of person who would reply, "My back hurts." When you were ill, your wife put a hand on your forehead and rubbed your stomach and went to the pharmacy for medicine and made you mung mean porridge. But when she wasn't feeling well, you just told her to take some medicine. You realize that you've never even handed your wife a glass of water when she couldn't keep food down for days, her stomach upset. It all started when you were roaming the country, immersed in playing traditional drums. 2 weeks later, you came home and your wife had given birth to your daughter. Your sister, who delivered the baby, said it was an easy birth. It was an easy birth, but your wife had the diarrhea. It was so severe that she didn't have any color in her face, and her cheekbones were protruding sharply even though she had just had a baby. Her condition didn't improve. It seemed to you that she wouldn't get better unless you did something. You gave your sister some money for some Chinese medicine. Your sobs grow louder as you sit on the porch of the empty house. Now you see that this was the only time you've ever paid for medicine for your wife. Your sister bought 3 packets of Chinese medicine and boiled it and gave it to your wife. Afterwards, when your wife had stomach problems, she would say, "If I could have had 2 more packets of Chinese medicine back then, I would have been cured." Your relatives liked your wife. All you said to them was hello when they arrived and goodbye when they left. But your many relatives came because of your wife. People said that your wife's food brimmed with love, even if all she did was to go to the garden and bring in some greens for bean paste soup and a Chinese cabbage for a simple salted cabbage dish. Simple dug in heartily, praising the bean paste soup and the salted cabbage. Your nephew and nieces would come to stay with you during school vacations and comment that they had gained so much weight that they couldn't button their school uniforms. Everyone said that the rice your wife made fattened people. When you and your neighbors planted rice in your paddies and your wife brought them a lunch of rice and scabbard fish stew with new potatoes, people would stop to stuff the food in their mouths. Even passers-by would pause to eat. Villagers vied to help in your fields. They said that when they ate your wife's lunch, they got so full that they could do double the amount of work before getting hungry again. If a peddler smelling melon or clothing happened to look inside the gate during the family's lunch, your wife was the kind of person who would welcome him in and give him a meal. Your wife, who happily ate with strangers, got along with everyone except with your sister. When your wife was suffering from stomach problems, she would complain as if that had occurred the day before. It would have been good if I'd taken 2 more packets of Chinese medicine back then. Even you said that I needed 2 more portions because I just had a baby and had to get well. But your sister said that with that mean face, why do you need more medicine? This is enough. And she didn't get me anymore. If I'd taken 2 more portions, I wouldn't have to go through this. But you had no recollection of it, and even though she repeated that story, you never got medicine for your wife when she had diarrhea. I should have taken more medicine. Now nothing works. When your wife had diarrhea, she stopped eating. You didn't understand how someone could stop eating for days. You ignored it when you were younger. Not until you were older did you ever ask if she should eat something. Then your wife would say with a miserable expression, animals don't eat when they're ill. Cows, pigs, when they're ill, they stop eating. Even chickens. The dog stops eating when it's ill. When it's ill, it doesn't look at food. Even if I give it something good and it digs a hole in front of its house and it lies down in there, a few days later it'll get up and that's when it will eat. People are the same way. My stomach is not feeling well, and even if the food is great, it's like poison when it gets inside me. When the diarrhea didn't stop, she would grate the dried persimmon and eat a spoonful. She would refuse to go to the hospital. How can dried persimmons be medicine? Go to the hospital and see the doctor and get medicine from the pharmacy. You urged her, but she didn't listen. Finally, if you insisted, she would snap. Didn't I say I wasn't going to the hospital? And would let you bring it up again. One year you left home in the summer and returned in the winter, and when you got back, you found a lump in your wife's left breast. You remarked that it wasn't normal, but your wife wasn't moved. Only when her nipple caved in and was filled with discharge did you take her to the hospital in town, her work towel still wrapped around her head. They couldn't tell you what it was right away, but examined her and said it would take 10 days to get the results back. Your wife sighed. What happened during those 10 days? What were you doing that was so important that you didn't go back to hear the results? Why did you put off going back to find out what was wrong? Finally, when her nipples became abscessed, you took your wife and went back to the hospital. The doctor said your wife had breast cancer. Cancer? Your wife said that it was impossible. She didn't have time to lie in bed ill. She had too much to do. The doctor explained that your wife didn't fit the profile for high risk of breast cancer. She hadn't had children late in life. She breastfed all 5 children. She didn't get her period when she was very young. Since she got it